Taj Tell 'em. Today we're continuing our series to the Democratic candidates for president in 2020. And so, Jack, who are we covering today?
Today we're going to cover a candidate that helped shovel the man's driveway so he can get out. He helped somebody propose to his now wife, saved 2 dogs' life, ran into a burning building and saved a woman, and also tackled a bank robber.
Christian Bale?
Close. The super mayor, Cory Booker.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Taj Tell 'em. We are recording from West Hollywood, California. And what are we going to tell him today, T?
We're going to talk about the dollar store Obama, Cory Booker.
Obama Light.
Shout out to that guy who commented
Nikolai.
on the video.
I like his comments. I do. I appreciate it. And he also says, not enough talk about Yang.
Hey, we will take the feedback. Definitely going to try to talk about Yang more.
So yes, today we'll be talking about Cory Booker, the next presidential candidate on our slate.
Yeah. So, how did you hear about Cory Booker?
You know what? Gosh, he just came out from nowhere, and I just started hearing his name, but I've never looked into him.
No, that's fair. I first heard about him, I think during Hillary Clinton, after she won the nomination in 2016, she was, thinking about certain people as a running mate, and I think his name got thrown in the ring. And so I know he was one of the young, rising stars of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
But, just like you, I never really looked into him until this podcast.
Yeah, and he had some memorable moments from the second debate, even the first debate. I feel like I didn't notice him at all.
No, that's true. I mean, so one of the things that people say about him is that he is well known enough by the media, and it's been covered enough so that they no longer really cover him as much. But he's not well known enough amongst the American people, so he's kind of in this no man's land.
So what's his history?
Well, he actually. Grew up the son of 2 parents who actually worked for IBM.
I hear they were execs or something, right?
Pretty senior level. And so, but they definitely, neither of his parents necessarily came from privilege. Cory Booker says that his dad, he grew up so poor that he says, "I'm just Poe because I couldn't afford the other 2 letters."
That's funny.
But self-made man, and as a result, Cory Booker actually grew up from some privilege, and then his dad said, "Hey, don't forget that you were born on third base." And so Cory Booker actually did go to Stanford as part of a high school football scholarship. He moved on to actually get his master's there in sociology. He had got an honors degree in history from Oxford. He was also a Rhodes Scholar. And then he got a law degree from Yale.
Damn.
So his dad
He's accomplished.
Oh, yeah. His dad also has another funny saying. He says, "You got more degrees in the month of July, but you're not hot, son."
Well, I bet after that, he ain't Poe no mo.
No, very true. I mean, Cory Booker has a net worth of somewhere between, I think, $600,000 to $1.3 million. That's excluding the home that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he's definitely he's doing okay for himself. I mean, he's not by far not the wealthiest.
Yeah, he's not a Delaney.
Oh, yeah, he's not a Delaney.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he's not a Biden. He's not a Kamala Harris either.
Ooh.
I would say even Andrew Yang probably has a higher net worth than him. But
actually, if that's the number is true, I read the statistics or this article saying Andrew Yang's at 1 million.
Oh, really?
And then the lowest one was Pete Buttigieg. He was at 100,000. But I have a feeling that's going to change soon.
No, yeah, true. He's got a war chest now of 20, 30 million?
Yeah, 25 mil or something like that. And that was just raised in the second quarter alone.
No, true. So, yeah, he's got this war chest to operate off of. So.
And Booker's got a few billionaires behind him, too.
Oh, yeah, he actually was part of a, a new venture with, I think, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates. He had since kind of pulled out of it and then donated his shares to a charity. But his shares were valued at somewhere between $1 to $5 million. So,
did his dad give him shit for that? You gave that all away, boy. You crazy? Because I know that's what my mom would say.
That's right. He's playing the long game. Because he wants to avoid that perception that he's in the pockets of these billionaires, and that's actually one of the criticisms often lobbed against Cory Booker, because he got the most Wall Street support of any senator. I think between like 2013, 2014, second only to Mitch McConnell.
When you're second only to Mitch McConnell in anything,
that's not good company.
But I mean, did he throughout his history being? I think he was a mayor of Newark,
Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, I can never pronounce that. I always want to say Wark, Newark. And
Jack was born in Taiwan.
Yeah, I went to ESL for a while. Then there's also...
Let me see your birth certificate.
My Kenyan birth certificate. And then I think he became a senator, right?
Then he became a senator of New Jersey.
Is he still a senator?
He still is.
Ah, got it. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, because I know you did a little history into research into his history.
Oh, so, he actually initially ran for mayor and lost. He was actually, but it was part of a documentary.
Wait, he had a documentary that followed him?
Yeah.
And showed how he lost?
Yeah. And then...
and they published it?
Not true. It was an Oscar-nominated documentary.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And then Cory Booker jokes that even that documentary, though, lost.
Oh, yeah, that's right. To March to the Penguins.
Yeah, March to the Penguins. And so, to his credit, he ran again and then he won.
Mm-hmm.
He's really known for, being very, I guess, kind of idealistic, and being and he knows how to kind of newsjack. So, one famous example is that he camped out in the projects for 10 days straight as a means to kind of gain awareness for like this open air drug market. And it actually worked. It actually brought the mayor of Newark to there at the time.
Oh, that was before he was mayor. He was city council or something like that, right? Okay.
And so, he really cites that as like, one of the more meaningful moments in his life, because it showed that, hey, you know what? People do have power to, affect change. And so, he actually carried on this practice of kind of doing these kind of publicity stunts, and to actually good results. Another famous case is like there's like this dog that was left outside in the cold, and then people were tweeting at him, complaining, and then he actually went there himself and rescued the dog.
These fucking Twitter warriors.
Not true, but
look at this dog. Hey, Cory Booker, you should do something about it.
Rather than me doing something about it.
What fucking bastards.
No, but
but he did.
But he did, and also, that's where, I mean, now, like, politicians interacting with social media is kind of old hat, but when he was doing it, he was actually, part of like the vanguard, the avant-garde.
Ooh, that's right, because that was like 2008 or 2009 or something.
Oh yeah, very true. So he was actually one of the first early adopters for it. And actually, in general, he's kind of a lot of his personal philosophy comes out of that time. Like he's kind of a bit of a technocrat. And we'll get into it when we go and talk about some of his policies. But also, he'll do things like, his neighbor's house is on fire, so he actually rushed in there with his bodyguard and like rescued her.
I heard about that. Like he had second-degree burns and stuff like that on his hands and I think the fire chief said that he literally saved her life.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it was like 150 degrees Fahrenheit in there when he rushed in. Smoke filled, but. He's a former, I think, tight end or linebacker for,
and that qualifies him to run into a house fire. That's crazy,
Because he's physically in good shape, big guy. So
and I don't mean that as in like, oh, he shouldn't have done. I mean that like that's not something he's trained for, and he still did it. That's actually very, very. I respect him for that. Oh no, because I ain't running into no house fire.
Very true, very true. But he did know the woman, though, personally. I think that definitely was an extra incentive.
So.
Oh, yeah. So that actually shows why he's a man of character. I think he definitely does, like, kind of walk the walk. But I think a lot of it, may come from his faith background. He's not shy about sharing the fact that he's a Christian. even though he is more so on the left. He actually
I
told
do
us,
respect that because I think like Obama, he really downplayed that aspect about him after he became president.
that's true. I mean, Obama did get some flack for like the Jeremiah Wright kind of stuff. So I think that's where, less attention on that, the better. But yeah, Cory Booker, he does kind of wear his faith on his sleeve. I mean, we attended his happy hour this week in LA.
Yeah, we went to the event, Cory Booker fundraiser on Wednesday the 21st at Scale LA.
Oh yeah, Scale LA, if you're listening, get some better AC.
and better sound systems.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the videos on our YouTube channel. So you get that buzzing noise. It's not.
It's gonna be linked right here.
Oh yeah, link below in the description. And while you're there, just smash that subscribe button.
Like this video. Share it with your friends. Okay.
But man, it was like, gosh, what would you say? Like 100 to 200 people in that office, and it was sweltering. Like literally, I was just sweating.
Dude, when you left, when we were outside, your shirt was just drenched.
No, it was like I felt like I was in Korean spa, man. I felt like it was a sauna.
Man. It was hot, and I mean, we're kind of digressing, but the event was it felt like a sermon.
Yeah, his rhetoric is very kind of inspirational. He pulls from biblical imagery. And so I do think it's an important part of his life and how he kind of views the world. He told this kind of funny story in an interview I listened to where as he was kind of like looking at deciding what college to go to, he actually stopped by Notre Dame because he was being recruited. And as part of the recruitment, they brought him onto the Notre Dame field. And he says that when you're in the end zone and then you look out, you can see this huge mural of Jesus, like with his hands up. And everyone calls that Touchdown Jesus.
Touchdown Jesus. Yeah, go.
And he was saying that like that almost convinced him to go to Notre Dame. And his dad had to like really kind of de-brainwash him to convince him to go to Stanford.
Yeah. Probably a good move for him.
No, fair.
Mm-hmm,
But that just shows, like, he's like, a really kind of emotional guy, wears his heart on his sleeve. And so that's where that kind of authenticity and earnestness, I think it's something that's definitely charming about him. But I think there is this kind of issue in the sense where I don't know if where the Democratic Party is today, if it's necessarily a good fit for his style. In the sense that it really feels like there's one part of the party that wants to really fight, because of Trump and everything that's going on. And the other part of the party just wants to go back to normal. And I think that's the part that Biden is really appealing to. But, for Booker, it's he's kind of caught in no man's land, I mean, he talks a lot about love. I think he maybe cribbed that from Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, I mean, during that, if you watch the video, there's a lot of talk about like how, love trumps hate, how we need to embrace love there's, we have more that the line that divides us are nowhere near as strong as the ties that bind us, like that kind of saying, that kind of talk.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think he's definitely taken a page from Obama's playbook and trying to be more inspirational. But I just think maybe the timing's not right. Because I think when Obama was running, I think maybe there was more goodwill on the part of the electorate to really kind of lean into that rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, when I started doing some research into him, I remember when we first talked, I said, he's kind of like an Obama 2.0. But now I'm looking at him, I'm like, he's more like an Obama light.
Hence, Dollar Tree.
Yeah, Dollar Store Booker, Dollar Store Obama. Yeah, it's just like it's like, okay. So before we get into more of his, what he kind of represents, I feel like maybe we should talk about what he's about, like where he came from. So, how was he as a mayor?
Yeah, so a lot of people, they point to things like him like delivering diapers to, women who were like kind of blocked by like the snowstorms to show that, he really cares about his constituents. So he has a lot of really great optics. I think, Mark Zuckerberg donated $100 million to the New York school system. And
and I heard he was actually, Mark Zuckerberg was actually trying to keep his name out of it, but Booker actually convinced him to put his name on.
Just because I think, Booker, he understands like publicity and like PR. So he understands that, Mark Zuckerberg, because of his celebrity, he would just kind of raise even more awareness to New York schools, because New York schools were in a tough shape. But so, you can definitely look at certain of these kind of like high publicity events as, evidence that, oh, look at what all the, Booker's doing. It fits that narrative that he's a bit of a disruptor. However, there is some criticism that, for example, the woman who was delivered a diaper, she was just like, well, if you only can get like the streets paved or the streets plowed, then maybe I could just go out there and buy diapers myself, so...
women complaining anyways, huh? I'm just kidding.
Wendy.
No, but thank you so much, Wendy, for letting me do this. I have to say, she's my rock. She today I was leaving early and she's like, no, go. And I was like, all right, thanks.
Wendy, smash that like button.
Okay, and then so with it sounds like he does really care about the people.
He does, and so that's where I think the kind of one of the criticisms about him, though, is that he still hasn't really given many specifics in terms of what he stands for and what he's going to do, as well as in terms of like very tangible results. They can be seen as like a little lacking, in the sense that, for example, that $100 million that were donated to the schools. It didn't have quite as large of a difference, but I would say it's more because the entire yearly budget for these schools is $1 billion. So that represents only 10%, but actually that was spread out over 4 years. And so that's 2.5% a difference in the budget each year. So really, what are people really expecting? And but then I guess the flip side is then people can criticize, well, why did Booker make such a big deal of it? So.
Well, you know what I say? Give those teachers a 2.5% raise.
Actually, that's where most of the money went to.
Good. Well, then he used it in the right place, I have to say.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's where I think, I think just because I think he's being very public in kind of what he's doing, I think he's just kind of inviting more criticism. But I think his heart's in the right place. I think if you look at his record, there's nothing kind of outstanding, but there's nothing troubling.
Now, though, this is what I saw when I did the research into his mayoralty, was that New York was going in a depopulation phase. Like, I think from the 1950s to the 1990s, there was like a 40% reduction of the population. Don't quote me on that. I'm bad with numbers.
And he's an accountant, ladies and gentlemen.
And then 2000 and to 2010, you actually saw an increase of the population. And I think he became mayor in 2006. So it felt like that might have been a positive thing where he actually was kind of, encouraging change in engendering a more positive image for the city. Because I know that the city there was a lot of crime. I think for the first couple of years he helped with the crime rate, but then I think the last couple of years it was not as stellar.
Yeah, I mean, some of that's out of his control, like budgets, things like that. With Chris Christie in office as governor at that time, he was slashing...
Krispy Kreme?
He was slashing funding. And so, but, to Booker's credit, one thing that if you look at his record, he's really willing to kind of reach across the aisle. And so, whether it be with, like maintaining a relationship with, say, Johnson & Johnson, who's based out of, New Jersey.
And I think a lot of insurance companies are out there too.
Oh yeah, as well as like a lot of like he has like we already mentioned a lot of support from Wall Street, and so he's willing to kind of he's more of a pragmatist in that sense. And even during his time,
he understands how the world works.
Exactly. Even though he is an idealist, he has more of a kind of a pragmatist side as well. And so that's where like he's definitely more of a moderate, within the Democratic Party. I would lump him like closer to say a Biden than say like a Sanders. And so, as we kind of jump into like his policies, you'll definitely see that represented as well.
Now, one thing that I that stood out to me was he really helped affordable housing in New York.
Oh, how so?
He had Goldman invest in a big development project and he had a lot of investments from these institutions because there's always that, especially if you're on the Democratic side, you're very cautious about taking money and you also appearing to be bought. But he understood that you need this kind of money in order to revitalize a community. Like, for example, in Inglewood, it was Magic Johnson's money. It has to come from somewhere. And if you can't get it from somebody who was from the community who made it big later on, then you go to where the money is. And there you have to kind of make it a win-win situation. And so Goldman. I read that article where they were saying that, hey, you know what, we were afraid to go in because these people they don't want to risk their money if it's not going to be successful. So they didn't want to push back from the community. So that was the way Cory Booker kind of brought him in and allowed the community to really accept it.
Yeah, because to Cory Booker's credit, he actually lives, he actually lived and I think still lives in a pretty rough neighborhood or pretty rough part of Newark. And so that's where, he is embedding himself within the community. And so, he doesn't necessarily have this kind of like savior complex that, he I think has developed a lot of goodwill and a lot of credibility. And so that's where, these partnerships where, with someone like Goldman Sachs, which, from a PR perspective aren't the best optics. I think because of the trust that he's gained with the community, they're willing to kind of like receive this help.
And little fact that I learned, in 2006, investigators in New Jersey foiled a plot by the Bloods gang to assassinate him.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I think it was the bad blood between him and the mayor before. Yeah, so I'm not implicating the mayor before, but I'm just saying like there was a lot of issues with that, and he was also involved in a brawl. Like he wasn't involved in a brawl, but like it was like a government kind of a meeting where they were appointing some people, and then the supporters of the other group started attacking, and they had to get riot police in there and everything.
Yeah, New Jersey's a rough place. Cory Booker, he also helped kind of tackle and arrest a bank robber.
Oh my God, really?
Oh, yeah. So, soon after he was elected, like he was walking around with his security detail, and then a guy robbed the bank right in front of him, and as he was running away, Cory Booker gave chase with his cars. And, yeah.
That's funny. All right. Well, I mean, I'm liking this guy so far. How about when he was a senator?
So as a senator, one piece of like, legislation that was supported by both Republicans and Democrats that, he gets a lot of credit for is some reforms over the criminal justice system. So, essentially what these reforms consisted of was, making the punishments for crack cocaine and powder cocaine the same. Also removing like the 3 strikes law, so that you could, so you don't get a lifetime, sentence for doing 3 like petty crimes.
I think he mentioned that about, during the debate. Like that was one of his point of contention with Biden.
Oh yeah, and also part of this bill, he removed a solitary confinement from juvenile hall.
Ooh.
Which is a big thing, because what's interesting, solitary confinement is considered torture in many other countries, and here we are doing it to kids. So I think Cory Booker definitely is way more credible on issues of criminal justice reform than, say, a Kamala Harris, because his stance and his voting record on policy is very credible. And he actually worked with Jared Kushner, of all people, on this bill. And so again,
that's the one time I feel like he shouldn't have reached across the aisle.
But that's kind of a unique set of circumstances where Jared Kushner's father was placed in jail in New Jersey by Chris Christie. And so that's actually responsible for why Chris Christie got knocked out of the the Trump orbit by Kushner. Mm-hmm. But that shows, where like, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so that's where Booker, he, as much as he does care about optics, he doesn't let that compromise what his
eyes on the prize.
Exactly.
Right. Well, okay. But how long since 2013? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And were they like do we know the effects of all those policies that he put in place now?
Well, I mean, it's relatively new, but I think already, I think any kid that's not getting put in solitary confinement, I mean, that's a win.
That's a good idea.
And I do think that I think it's one of those things where, because now he's developing also this reputation of being willing to reach across the aisle. that's where you could infer that if he say does win the presidency in 2020, that perhaps he'll have an easier time getting his agenda passed. I mean that's pretty speculative, I admit. So.
Hey,
But
Mitch McConnell, we have the same amount of donors.
hey, we have the same donors. But that's also where you can see, he's probably going to stay away from certain policy ideas, like Bernie Sanders' idea of introducing a tax on all kind of stock transactions. And so I think those kind of ideas, if that's what you're looking for, I don't think Booker's your candidate.
Yeah, Booker's definitely more of a moderate and centrist.
Very,
approach.
very true.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Even in a stance for Medicare for all, he's for it, but he'll definitely accept. He says he's willing to accept a single payer system.
That's the thing that's the feeling that I get when I read through his issues and his platform, is more like he's willing to fight for certain things or to move the ball forward to this towards that goalpost, but he's not very clear on how he's going to do it or where that's actually going to go. What's the end goal there? Because he's just like, I'm going to fight for animal welfare or something like that. That's one of the very interesting kind of issues that he puts on his website. But you just don't really know how he's going to do it.
Oh, yeah, true. He's light on specifics, and I think that's definitely a criticism for him. I mean, even when we were at the happy hour, his speech very rousing, but then once again light on specifics. So.
Yeah, I think we joked the guy who introduced him, the girl who introduced him had actually more specifics than he did.
No, very true. And I got a sense that he was trying to test out whether gun control is going to be one of his signature issues, because he spoke about it a little more.
I mean, that's how he was introduced.
True. And I think once, what was that California guy who was big on gun control? The guy who wanted to pass Swalwell. Once Swalwell's out of the race, so there's no longer a candidate that's really championing that. So, perhaps, he sees that as his kind of strategic tack.
Mm-hmm.
But, so that's definitely a weakness, but, I always think that your greatest weakness is your greatest strength and vice versa. And so there's an interesting proposal that, he put forward in the Senate, and I think he is probably going to do it, when he's president as well, which is it's like a government jobs kind of proposal. So,
a guaranteed federal...
So it's a jobs guarantee. So it's the Federal Jobs Guarantee Development Act. And so, but the way his approach on it is interesting. So what he proposes is that he would guarantee jobs in 15 rural and urban areas as a test to see how it works first. And based on this little pilot, he can then take insights and roll it out, to greater parts of the country. And so that's where, I like how he's a pragmatist. So he's saying, hey, rather than just try to, shoehorn, ram this vision down people's throats, let's actually see what it's like. Let's do it in 15 different places. It's going to be guaranteeing a job that pays at least $15 an hour. And so that's where I could definitely see how it's a more incremental approach. But I think by looking at the real world feedback, you'll probably get to better results.
What kind of jobs is he guaranteeing?
So that's where, once again, light on specifics, he would say that he would leave that responsibility more to the local governments who should know better. But a lot of people are speculating childcare, and elderly care, just because those are two definitely growing areas, as well as I think there's a lot of chatter right now about universal childcare. And so I think that kind of synergy, I think, is a good idea.
I think you mentioned this last time. Do we really want a government employee to do the child care for your kid?
So that's actually a valid criticism, because when you actually look at the data and studies, the private sector actually doesn't really honor or see as valuable government experience, because they don't necessarily trust the training or the qualifications of these candidates. And so,
working for Amazon, we're still on food stamps. We're living out their cars. And then now I'm looking at Amazon, and they proudly mention that they're paying $15 an hour. And I was looking up articles and stuff, and then they're saying that it was from the political pressure from Bernie Sanders. and just pointing that out and bringing that to the national limelight. And then now Jeff Bezos is going, oh, motherfucker, I got to pay these people more money. But, it's a good PR move for him. But at the same time, he wouldn't have done it without Bernie Sanders. So I'm just wondering do you need a federal jobs guarantee to do that? Or do you just have to apply some political pressure or use the media to his favor, like how Cory Booker has been doing?
No, that's true. And, you bring up an interesting point, because I think that's where I would even say that, candidates like Cory Booker, they really benefit from more kind of extreme candidates like Sanders that really move the conversation so left that, Cory Booker,
has no choice but to go that way too.
Oh yeah, and actually he looks more like a safe and reasonable to kind of corporate interests.
That old man yelling at the sky is just too crazy.
Booker.
Yeah, before that, they probably wouldn't even look at Booker or something like that, huh?
Oh, yeah, I mean, because, if you think about it, some of Booker's ideas, like even this federal jobs act, could be seen as like, whoa, like that's really extreme,
Yeah.
But I think now, in relative to how far Sanders is pushing left, like it's okay, this looks a little more reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's where I think his, his donors, I think they're looking for kind of like a safer candidate. And I think that's where... I think that's where Booker's opportunity is.
But also, there's actually a pretty novel idea from him. You mentioned to me baby bonds.
Oh yeah, so this is also another example of like a great kind of like modern idea. So this baby bonds idea is that every child, I believe, as long as the family comes below a certain amount, is going to be giving, I believe starting with like $1,000, and then each year the government will kind of add to that account for the baby. Every year, depending on the parent's income. And then once the child turns 18 years old, they'll have...
He gets to run away with all that money.
Sort of. He has access to the money, or she.
Bye, mom. Bye, dad.
but he or she can only use it for education, purchasing a house, or I think starting a business.
Why to use it for drugs?
Well, I mean, when you go to college,
Yeah, take some of that tuition money your mom and dad saved for you.
There you go. Go. I mean, that's all I did in college, but.
Wait, how long was college? It felt like it went by like that. Okay.
But yeah, no. So I mean, that's a perfect example of something where it's not as like progressive and far left as like free college and like forgiving student loans.
Oh yeah, and I think he says that's going to help people get into start off their life better, like a leg up.
Because they estimate it'll be around like $40,000, and so that by no means is that going to pay for all of your college, but it's going to pay for a significant amount. Plus,
but if you're smart with with going to college, like you start off with community college and then you go to a regular 4-year university, and that could pay off the whole thing.
Oh yeah, especially if you're eligible for like certain Pell Grants or like because it's not exclusive, this baby bonds, from like other financial assistance. So I think if you combine it all in the aggregate. For those students who need support and they do it smart, like with community college and then going in-state public, then yeah, you can definitely pay for college. And so I think that's probably a lot more of a common sense solution than this like free college stuff, because I think it's still as the end consumer, end user, you still are required to make kind of responsible decisions with it. Like you're not going to go out of state private for 4 years and expect the government to pay for it. It's like,
and what I do like about that is it gives that child 18 years to think about this.
Fair.
And he has opportunity. He has different choices. He can go to college. He can buy a home. He could start a business. Like it almost makes it seem like, hey, I'm not very restrictive. We want to see these areas, flourish. So what can you do here?
Oh yeah, he could go to trade school, vocational school. And so I think the freedom of that versus saying like free college.
Like, oh yeah, I have to go to college in order to take this. And what good is college for me?
No, exactly. Because what's interesting is like a lot of the younger generation, they understand that college isn't necessarily the guarantee to a middle class lifestyle.
They all of them want to be YouTube stars.
Well, hey, join the club.
I wouldn't say we're stars yet.
But yeah, so I think that's where it's just, it's providing freedom and responsibility, to, the people who are, it's supposed to be helping, which I think is always a good thing. But with enough safeguards, so it's not just like, here's $40,000, good luck, but
Right.
it's like you can only put it in these buckets. But there's a lot of flexibility within those buckets.
Yeah, but I'm surprised at how of a long-term view that is. That's not very politician-like.
No, that's true. Yeah, because you're not going to see the fruits of this within, his own administration, if he does end up becoming president. And so, but that's also another reason why, I like the idea, because it's like we can't be so myopic and just think so short term. Like we have to think a little more long term. And so that's where I don't think this is like an attempt just to kind of buy people's votes, like the forgiving of student loans is. I think this is more so like, hey, let's set up like a solid foundation for the next generation.
Got it. Yeah, I think that policy is very unique. I think that's one of the most unique policies that I've seen from him. Other than that, I was very underwhelmed.
Yeah, because across the board, when you look at his other policy stances, like they're, he's kind of like towing the party line, especially when it comes to like he's a little agnostic when it comes to Medicare for all versus single payer option.
Well, he does mention that he wants Medicare for all.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, that's definitely what he would like. But I think, well, once again, I think this is where maybe he's being a little more honest, because I think regardless of who wins the presidency in 2020, they're still going to have to contend with a Senate that at best will be a slight majority for Democrats, so not the supermajority they need for it to be filibuster proof. And so that's where any kind of healthcare reform law that gets passed, it probably will not be Medicare for all. They're just going to have to be compromises. So I think that's where Booker's position is perhaps a little more honest than other candidates.
Yeah. What this whole Medicare for all talk, what they don't mention is you have to understand there's a lot of people who work for private insurance companies. They might hate their job, but they still work there. And if you do Medicare for all, what are those people going to do?
Oh yeah, no, very true. That actually was one reason why Obama, I think I think his famous interview with Mark Maron on WTF, he was citing the impact of cutting, healthcare spending on the economy as a whole, just because it employs like a significant portion of this country's labor force. So you're right. You just can't snip that away without any kind of.
So that's kind of the pragmatic side of Booker.
No, very true.
Now I do like how he focuses on housing. He has another policy that just kind of sounds like Kamala Harris's policy. Also, just the renter's credit capped at 30% of your income. So he would, on average, a family would get like $4,800 towards their housing expenses after they file their taxes.
Well, is there like a income cutoff? Like if you earn more than...
no specifics, but he did say it's an average of $4,800, and it's based on the neighborhood fair market value of rents. So it's an index that the government tracks. So it's not like, I can just rent out the penthouse in Beverly Hills, or if there is one. And then he does talk about, putting more money in the housing trust fund, reforming restrictive zoning laws, which is a huge issue because there's a incentive for landlords, and especially large corporate landlords, to get very restrictive zoning laws, because if you don't have that much housing, the housing that you own is going to go up in terms of prices. That's why we have these ridiculous home prices now. So it's kind of an artificial way of increasing the home value. So that I like the fact that he's actually talking about that, because that's a huge expense for most people.
No, true. I think he is definitely aware of the issues that are affecting everyday Americans. But to your point, he's just very light on the details. That's actually maybe my biggest concern about Booker. Is because I think his heart's definitely in the right place. I think he's a person of integrity. But even if you take, for example, how he's running his campaign as like as a microcosm for perhaps how he will run the country, not the best run campaign. I think especially relative to say someone like Elizabeth Warren, and say we take the two events that we attended as an example. I mean, this space that, he chose to host his event at, it was on the 10th floor of like an office building. We mentioned the AC wasn't working. The sound system wasn't really.
It was called Happy Hour with Cory Booker, and like they just had bottles of wine just in buckets.
Oh yeah, and then Andrew Yang, actually with way less political experience, actually had a much better run event, and so Elizabeth Warren's event I think was much better run as well.
Elizabeth Warren's event was way well organized, very organized. And the thing about Booker's event was, the thing that stood out to me was at Warren and Andrew Yang, people wanted to talk to each other. People wanted to engage. People were excited. Like they were there with a purpose. At Cory Booker's, everybody just kind of just came and they're like, "Oh, I want to see Cory Booker." It was almost like they wanted to see like a motivational speaker or a concert or something. And as soon as it ended, I remember very clearly everybody just turned around and left, headed for the elevators, which the elevators took hell long.
No, very true. And even on the drive out, people were cutting us off.
Oh man, yeah, dude, I feel like I wouldn't get that from the Yang Gang.
Definitely not. No, when we went to the Yang Gang's, meetup, a lot of fraternity. Like people, it was like there was so much enthusiasm in that crowd, and so much kind of love for one another there. And I would even say, more muted, but definitely still feelings of fraternity at the Elizabeth Warren event. I think people were hanging around looking for ways to kind of help support the campaign. I would say very little to none of that at the Booker event. It seemed like, I agree, people were there more out of like curiosity than necessarily like enthusiasm as like part of some kind of movement.
Or maybe they just felt like he spoke to them in a sense of like a kind of Pete Buttigieg kind of way. Like he spoke to the morality of the nation. He spoke about the values of the nation, and that feels good. It does feel good. I mean, I felt that people were like, yeah, like it felt like you were at a church, like amen, like hallelujah. But and he also mentioned like, I'm going to be, when I become president, I'm going to ask more of you than any other presidents ever. And I was like, so what are you going to ask of us? He never got into that.
Yeah, no, once again, yeah, very light on details.
And one thing I wanted to mention was, for example, he talked about ending Citizens United. He talked about gerrymandering and voter suppression. He talked in gun violence, one of his, I guess, now signature proposal, I guess. I don't know.
He's testing it out.
Taking on NRA, gun licensing, universal background, ban assault weapons, limit gun buyers to 1 gun per month, which still comes out to 12 guns a year, okay? And I'm just like, okay, it might just ill-informed or something, but haven't we been doing that for like trying to do that for 10 years or 20 years and it still hasn't gone anywhere? So it feels like he just copied and pasted from another candidate and just put it on.
Oh, yeah, no, very true. Yeah, I think outside of his baby bonds proposal, there's really nothing distinguishing the policies he's offering. I think it's more so he's offering his personality, his kind of experience as someone reaching across the aisle. Also, I'll say this, strategically, I think, how I can see him securing the nomination is perhaps through the African-American voting bloc. Because he's really just contending with Biden and Kamala Harris. And, something I've heard, from some analysts is that, the African-American voting bloc, they're a little more cynical and for good cause, just, given this country's history, complicated history with race. And so, for example, in 2008, the majority of African-Americans actually supported Hillary Clinton up until Obama showed enough support, I believe, in like South Carolina, and then it was a complete sea change to him. And I think similarly, Biden right now seems to have a lot of support amongst the African American community. But I think if Booker can gain enough traction in the early states, we can definitely see that shift happen. But he is kind of competing with Kamala a little bit. But I do think
I think Kamala is ahead of him on that one, huh?
right now, but what's interesting is that he doesn't have as complicated of a record as Kamala. I think Kamala's record
You're
as
so political, complicated.
I mean,
I would say terrible.
yeah, Kamala's putting innocent people in
Yeah.
jail. She's putting 1,500 people in jail who smoked marijuana, even though she herself was smoking marijuana and laughing about it. What's interesting is Cory Booker, while on the topic, he wants to legalize marijuana, but he actually has never tried marijuana.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But he always likes to cite the fact that two former U.S. presidents, Barack Obama and George W. Bush, both professed trying marijuana and even heavier, more illegal drugs. I think he's referencing cocaine. And yet, they've gotten away from any kind of punishment. But then you look at the way our criminal justice system is, people like Kamala Harris are locking up people for much less. And so that's where I think, Cory Booker's a lot more credible on issues of criminal justice that the African-American community cares about. And so that's where I could definitely see how he can have advantage over her.
I'm not sure if I can trust anybody who's never smoked weed. I mean, you gotta at least try, right? But I mean, okay. So I mean, it's just when I look at his other policies, with gun violence, he has this oversight on gun manufacturers.
What kind of
and
oversight?
I think Sanders got in trouble for this in 2016. So right now, he on his website it says, in other words, gun manufacturers have little incentive to make their products safer.
What is that in reference?
So I think it's talking about like gun trafficking and like making it putting safeties on and stuff
like
like
the
that.
fingerprint sensor and things like that.
No, it's not. He didn't even talk about the fingerprint sensor. He's talking about handgun microstamping. So basically, microstamping the bullet. So this way you can trace the bullet back, and then making. But the weird thing is he's putting it on the gun manufacturers. And like I think 2016, Sanders got in trouble for this and for Sandy Hook because the Sandy Hook people wanted to, the family of the victims wanted to sue the gun manufacturers for allowing this to happen. Which to me, I mean, I feel bad for them, but that just seems like you're just trying to find somebody to blame. Like, hey, these guys just make the guns. They made the guns legally. Why are they responsible for who uses them? I feel like that, this whole gun violence thing, there's another one, the boyfriend loophole. Right now, current law only forbids an abusive spouse or ex-spouse convicted of abuse or under a restraining order from purchasing a firearm, but it doesn't extend to dating partners.
Yeah, and I think that shows how the law is kind of lagging behind culture. I think more people are choosing to cohabitate without marriage. And so, no, I mean, I think that's where the law, I agree with you, the law needs to be updated to kind of reflect changing social mores.
Well, I guess for me, the way I look at this is I'm thinking, how are you going to prove you guys were dating partners? Looking at your Facebook relationship status. Okay, even if you can, what's the issue there? Like I feel like the issue is not the gun itself. I mean, I think you definitely have to control it, make it. There are steps that you can take to like minimize, gun violence in neighborhoods and stuff like that. Looking at guns, but I feel like the broader topic would be what the environment these people are growing up in, the mental health issues, the economy. Like, if I feel if I can't afford to live, I'm gonna end up living in a really bad neighborhood, and if I'm living in a bad neighborhood, I need to protect myself, and then you're just gonna have guns in the house, or you get into a bad situation, you get around with bad people, and that's just gonna be part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue. I mean, one thing that I will give Cory Booker credit for is that he's not just riding the news cycle. I mean, obviously he did make reference to like the mass shooting. But he also talks about just like the normal everyday gun violence that happens in communities like his in Newark that are more get less coverage because it's just people of lower socioeconomic status, many whom are people of color, and so that's where the issue is though that a lot of those guns are legally procured. And so that's where all these protections, may not really do much to kind of mitigate this. And so I agree. I think, there needs to be a way to look at to target underlying conditions. And that's where something like, to bring in our boy Andrew Yang, his idea of universal basic income, one of the conditions is that you do not commit a crime and go to prison. And so
you pay people to stay out of prison.
In a sense. And what's interesting is they've done studies, and this actually works, because the main reason why people turn to crime is for economic reasons. And so if they had an alternative way to make a living, then they wouldn't necessarily turn to crime. And so that's where they've done studies where they've paid people to stay out of prison effectively, and it works. Recidivism rates drop significantly.
If I know I'm going to lose $1,000 a month by doing this, I think I'm going to think about it.
Yeah, plus, you're already getting $1,000 a month, so that, it's not like, man, where am I going to get any money, So
you just got to wait till next month.
Exactly. And you can pull together, with your buddies, and then, with $1,000 a month, pull between 3 people. That's enough to cover basic expenses.
Yeah. One last thing I kind of want to mention about two things, actually. I thought it was, I'm sorry, 3 things. So he talks about providing funding for research on gun violence. That, I think it's hey, that's very good. That's smart. We do need to do that so we get to the bottom of the idea. What is it? Now I'm thinking mental health, but I don't know shit. I think that's the problem. Is calling the IRS to investigate the NRA. You follow the money. All right. Just like that Jerry Epstein thing. You follow the money. And the last thing here, this is the part where I have to be a little critical. He says, 90% of American voters approve of gun background checks before buying guns, and 70% of NRA members approve it. So why the fuck we haven't passed that shit?
Well, I think it's definitely the result of the lobby, the NRA lobby. I think it's just that idea of a slippery slope from their angle, that once you have one control passed, then the more and more are going to get passed. And to some degree, I can see why they think that way, because you can look at statistics gun ownership is actually per capita is higher in Switzerland and in Israel, but they don't have nearly the problems we have.
Oh yeah, in Israel they carry it.
Oh yeah, because a lot of them have to serve in the military, and so that shows that I guess it doesn't necessarily. I mean, there's the accessibility to guns may not be the sole cause. And so that's where going back to the research.
It's because we have violent video games.
Well, all these other countries have it too, though. So, I mean, it's not like people aren't playing video games in Israel and in Switzerland.
We've had shootings way before violent video games came out. They keep pointing to Grand Theft Auto, which I have to say, I don't know, have you ever played Grand Theft Auto? I did. If you play it for a long time, when you go out, you think about, how am I going to murder this guy and steal his car?
Background check on this man, please.
Yeah, I was thinking about buying some guns before every Booker gets sworn in. But I mean, I look at all these policies and I just go, okay, it's just very cookie cutter to me.
No, very true. And I think that's where he's really running as Biden Jr. in a sense. He, I think, is a younger black non-senile Joe Biden. And so, I mean, honestly, he is kind of the safe choice in that sense. I would lump him, Booker, Biden, and Buttigieg, the 3 Bs. I would say are the moderates here. They represent kind of a reversion to the mean in a sense, versus I think the progressive wing of people like Sanders and Warren. And of course, then there's completely, outside of the spectrum, someone like an Andrew Yang that I think is very compelling.
Yeah, he's the wild card here. He really is. Nobody is. I mean, and you see people kind of using his rhetoric a little bit more now. But I have to give Cory Booker some credit here. He's the only person that's running that ever talked about animal welfare.
What's his stance on animal welfare?
Okay, so he wants to shut down all puppy mills, which great. This next one I don't agree with. Enact a national ban on shark fin sales.
As you're Chinese, you want that soup, dude.
No, it's delicious. I've had it before when I was younger, so I never knew the cruelty that went behind it. It's pretty fucking cruel. Yeah, so like, I'm fine with that. Ending animal testing, help endangered species and new wildlife habitats. Like, hey, nobody's talking about that, and animals don't get votes, so that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they are sentient beings. I think what's interesting is,
and if he wins, I bet Beyond Burger stock is gonna soar.
Perhaps because he is vegan.
He is,
Mhm.
dude. That's a big vegan. He's a big guy.
Oh yeah. So
He's like 6'3".
Oh yeah, and he's not necessarily lanky either. Mm-mm. So, but I think that shows once again where his lifestyle is reflecting his values. So yeah, more ups to him.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about him overall?
Honestly, he's a good safe choice. Like I wouldn't be upset if he won the nomination. I think that definitely he's a little untested. I think his lack of specifics makes you wonder what you're really gonna get, and so that's where I put him. I put him in the same bucket as Buttigieg and Biden. It's just kind of like just essentially just not Trump.
So a vote for him is more a vote of confidence in his ability, and that's it.
I think it's more like just an alternative, a safe alternative to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's how I'd sum up a vote for him.
How do you think he would stand up to Trump in a debate or something like that, or in the national vote?
So that's where he does get criticized as a lightweight, and I do think that he may have some trouble going toe to toe with Trump. He doesn't have anything super problematic in his record, but also I think his presence as a politician, he's definitely not as well spoken as say like a Buttigieg, and even say you look at the I believe it was the bar hearings when he was flanked by Klobuchar and Harris, who were both prosecutors, in the past. So they actually did a much better job of questioning. He kind of flubbed some line about obstruction versus collusion. And so that's where, his stage presence versus, say, someone like Trump, I could see him maybe falling into some trouble, but definitely not as much as, say, like a Warren who got, mired in that Pocahontas stuff.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add to his candidacy?
No, not so much. One thing I'll say is that he is dating. If he wins, he'll be the first single childless person to win the presidency. But he is dating Rosario Dawson, so big ups to him. What's interesting, I did some Google keyword research on Cory Booker. You know what? A very strange one of the most commonly searched keyword combinations for him is
what?
Cory Booker gay. Which is very strange. But apparently, I guess there are rumors going on about that. Which
maybe the gay community receives him very well, and they want to see if they have a chance.
Well, Rosario Dawson then took him off the market.
I remember when he said, I'm always happy. At the event, he's like, I'm always happy when I come to LA, and it's because, and then somebody goes, Rosario. He's like, yeah, that's right. But before Rosario.
yeah, he grew up here. He spent some time here. So.
Yeah, that's true. What I kind of look at when I look at his history and kind of assess him as a politician, when he left New York, it didn't seem like there was a lot of he didn't solve all the issues that he was set out to solve. And then he saw an opportunity to become senator, and he took it. So, what that says to me is, he cares about the issue and he'll try to solve it. But if he has an opportunity to get to the next level, I think he's going to take it.
So, rounding the home stretch, where would you rank Booker relative to the other candidates for your own personal preference?
Personal preference, actually, he's a good stand-up guy. I believe that his heart is in the right place. I believe he's not a corrupt guy based on everything I've seen. So I would say he would rank above Buttigieg and Beto, but below Yang, Sanders, and Warren. I know Sanders and Warren are more extreme, but I like the fact that they're pushing the conversation towards that place, whereas he's more like, okay, let's go back to normal and let's just solve the problem, a little bit of the problem at a time. So that I just felt like he doesn't have enough. His policies aren't strong enough for me to really understand what he's trying to do, what is his life mission. But at least he feels to me like a good enough guy that he's not going to be bought. Again, we haven't done the research into Pete and Beto, but that's the feeling that I get from those guys. Klobuchar just seems kind of out of that view. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Tulsi is going to be before Warren, Sanders, and Booker. So Booker is kind of like 5th place for me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually expect Tulsi Gabbard to stay in the race?
Nope, I don't think so. I want her to but you know, the thing is, this is a topic that we want to cover on another episode, but the media treatment of all these candidates. And I just don't think Tulsi is getting a fair shake at all. And the DNC is also kind of, you know, she's upsetting the status quo. You know, everybody wants to support the troops, and she's supporting the troops in her own way, but she's being called an Assad toady, you know, by this New York Times journalist, Barry Weiss, which is just, and she has no idea what she's talking about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, similar to you know, I would put him at the top of the pack for my own personal preference when it comes to the moderate candidates. You know, I think that he definitely has more experience than, say, like a Buttigieg. But at the same time, I think, you know, I have concerns over Biden's mental health. Like, I think his inability to even...
You notice I didn't even mention Biden.
Yeah, I think he's definitely far past his prime. I think it's almost dangerous to put someone like that in the White House.
Wait. So he's not ready to pass the torch, but where do you leave the torch?
But definitely, you know, this isn't this open secret. You know, Yang's my man. But I think that when it comes to Warren and Sanders, I have some reservations about some of their policies. I think in some of their policies, the cure is worse than the disease. You know, as someone who saw my healthcare premiums go up 300% as a result of Obamacare, you know, I'm very skeptical about how they're going to pay for a lot of these giveaways, like the free college. And so that's where I have serious reservations about Warren and Sanders. And that's where someone like a moderate candidate like Booker can appeal to me. But, you know, to your point, you're really just voting for a reversion to the mean. And so, you know, definitely, you know, our country, you know, is at kind of an inflection point right now. And so I think something a little more dramatic, like Yang's universal basic income, I think is needed.
Yeah, I do think so. And he's very specific with his policies. You know exactly what he wants to do, and he's going to try to do it. If he can't do it, then that means Congress is not letting him do it. Whereas Booker, he's just like, you can almost blame him if it doesn't it doesn't happen, because he's not really saying like, this is what I want to do. You know, you can't see where he's gonna fail. You know.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a strong vision. So I know what you mean. It's like I just feel very tentatively saying, Booker's a good guy, you know. But it's like I don't know what he's gonna do if he gets elected.
Where would you rank him against Tulsi?
I would definitely rank him above Tulsi. I think Tulsi's a single-issue candidate. She's just against the military-industrial complex, which is a good policy.
I think that's a big issue. That's why.
It's definitely a big issue. But you know, she seems very light on the other issues. So I think, I think she's probably more so vying for like a cabinet position, maybe Secretary of Defense.
Oh God, I would like to see that. Actually, I don't know can she be Secretary of Defense?
Oh, why can't she?
I feel like they were all generals.
No, I mean Mike Pompeo is not a.
Oh, he's not. Oh, okay. I haven't looked into him. Okay, yeah, but he's a sleazeball anyways. I'm gonna get contacted by the FBI or Homeland Security.
It was this man. It was. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Taj Tell. If you like what you heard, go ahead and just smash that subscribe button.
Or give us a like, a thumbs up, anything to help, and make sure you turn on the notifications.
5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
I don't know what the ratings are. A lot of or Google.